Hello, everyone. Today, we will continue our series, Learn from the World Champions, and we will look at the game played by the second world champion, Emanuel Lasker. In this game, we're going to see a very useful idea, which I hope you will remember and use in your games. Uh, This is one of Lasker's most famous games. He played it against Johann Bauer and it started as the bird opening. F45, E3, knight F6. Another way for black to play, because white, well, because white has his pawns here, we know white bishop probably wants to go in this direction. So one of the ways for black to play in this position is to put his bishop here first, which will make it a lot more annoying for this bishop to do anything. But Bauer plays here, which is fine, knight f6. Lasker, as expected, puts the bishop on the long diagonal. Pawn b3, pawn e6, bishop b2, continue with the plan. Black gets ready to castle. Lasker brings out the other bishop. The downside to the structure, of course, is white is not really challenging the center. But for the time being, the bishop's still kind of good. So bishop d3, b6. Black bishop is going to go on this diagonal. It makes sense because this one is not available. Knight c3. For the time being, we're blocking the bishop, but Lasker has a plan of transferring the knight. Bishop b7. Black continues with the plan. Knight f3. Lasker continues to develop. Knight d7. Nothing special. Both sides are playing really well. Castle, castle. So far, so good. Knight e2. Lasker tries to bring his knight around. And black gains more control of the center with pawn c5, which seems very, very reasonable. Knight g3. The knight makes its way around, and black connects the rooks with queen c7. This is becoming a little bit scary. In a number of openings, one way to deal with something like this would be to put your knight here, which never happened in this game, but it's an idea to remember. Lasker puts his knight on e5. It makes sense, and black takes this knight. Okay, knight takes, bishop takes. He can also take with a pawn. The upside is it opens up the rook, but at the same time it blocks this bishop. So Lasker takes with the bishop, bishop e5, queen c6. Black has some dreams on this line. And now queen e2. Lasker simply connects the rooks, defends his pawn. And black decides to expand on the queen side, a6. Maybe b5 will be played, followed by c4, which, I mean, it's not entirely terrible. Well, Lasker has a lot of pieces pointing this way. Sorry, that's a pawn. Knight, queen, rook. So he wants to get something going. So he plays knight h5, which targets this pawn and also sometimes tries to trade off this knight. And black takes. And now this becomes very, very, very instructive. There is an idea which happens quite a bit, actually, the double bishop sacrifice. And the main point of it is to open up the opponent's king, which is what Lasker does here. He sacrifices bishop number 1. Black takes. If black doesn't take, this is just very good for white. So black takes. The king runs away, and now he sacrifices the bishop number 2. And the point is, white gave up two pieces, but black king is completely open, and hopefully white will be able to checkmate. Black did not defend the best way. He accepts the sacrifice, takes a now very, very important move. White, of course, wants to bring the rook, but this will give black time to move his rook and run away. So first, white plays queen g4 with the idea to drive the king to the edge, and only then bring the rook so that the king cannot run away. And of course, king here doesn't work because checkmate. Okay, so the king goes to, well, actually it's very important. Of those three moves, one of them is better than the other two. If black plays here, rook here will be followed by checkmate. The same thing with this. Here it's a little bit more tricky because after rook here, black has a defensive mechanism of pawn e5 with the idea to give up his queen, which is what happens. So rook h3, black blocks with the queen, Lasker wins the queen. At first it looks like it's not so simple because black has two bishops and a rook for white's queen. However, white has a small tactic. I will pause for a second to let you find it. And the tactic, of course, is the fork of the bishops, which is what happens. Queen d7, the bishop, black saves this bishop, the other one gets captured, and black brings his king back into the world. And of course, Lasker can start taking pawns, but he can take either one on the next move. So he decides to activate the rook first. Rook f1. Black decides to defend this pawn. And Lasker does not take the other pawn. It actually gives black a little bit of counterplay, possibly. Instead, he plays queen d7 because he wants to make the same threat work again. The threat, of course, is queen here, forcing the king to the edge, and now bring the second rook with a checkmate. So black moves this rook to give his king an escape square, which makes sense. Queen g4 happens anyway, the king runs away, and Lasker takes the pawn to open up the rook. At first, it looks like black can take, but the problem with taking is white has at least two different tactics here. White has queen f5, which attacks the bishop and the pawn, and if black defends, this of course is just free because of the spin. Or if you prefer, we have this one, which attacks the bishop and threatens checkmate. And of course, again, this pawn. And so black did not take. Black moves the bishop. Bishop d7. And this rook is active, so white puts more pressure on the pawn. Black defends. And white puts even more pressure on the pawn, using the pin on both sides. Very, very nice move, queen g6. Pawn f6, the only way to save this pawn. And now I will pause and let you find the crushing move by Lasker. And most of you probably looked at rook takes f6, sacrifice, but the question is, were you able to see all the way to the end? And the idea is after takes, obviously this rook is attacked. So if the king goes here, this rook is free. After here, Lasker has a check. And when the king goes down, we have this skewer, which is what happened in the game. The king moved here, queen g7 check, and the game went on for another several moves, and black eventually resigned because white is just up a queen for a rook. This is a very useful game. There are a number of concepts which are important to remember. One of the concepts is this idea, if you're attacking with a lot of pieces, try to get rid of your opponent's defenders. Another idea, of course, is the double bishop sacrifice to open up the king. And yet another is this idea to force the king to the edge before the rook lift, before raising our rook. Uh, and of course, always, 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 you need to look at tactics. I hope you enjoyed this game. Please like, please subscribe, please recommend this glorious channel to all your friends, and more exciting material will come out soon. Thank you.